Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 351st episode of Constructed Criticism. I am your Viking host, Mason, joined by my Valkyrie co-host, Allison. Allison, how you doing?
Am I in trouble?
No. Oh, I called you by your fault. Yeah, well, the trouble is that I've been seeing you get pretty hyped for Kaldheim. We have to wait a week, so it's pretty.
Okay. I need to calm down the hype.
You need to calm down the hype just a little bit. I know it's exciting. I know you want to talk all about Tybalt and just how handsome he is. Can we talk about that for a second? I guess we'll talk about when the card comes up. They gave him they made Tybalt kind of hot. I'm just gonna say it. I'm confident.
Yeah, that's actually one of our new categories. Is Tybalt hotness scale.
Yeah. Every time they made Tybalt kind of hot. I'm just gonna say it. I'm confident.
Yeah, that's actually one of our new categories. Is Tybalt hotness scale.
Yeah. Every time I try to come up with a fun category this week, how hot is Tybalt? Oh my goodness. Well, that's for the patrons only, Allie. We are doing the Pick 2 set review today, though, so we're going to hop into that in just 1 second. But if you want to support the show, you go to oasisgames.com, use code CCMTG at checkout to get 4% off every order, and use code WOULD-THAT-BE-GOOD at checkout for 15% off your first order. And then you can also go to patreon.com/CCMTG, where you can be a patron of the show. Normally, you get to ask a Patreon question during the set reviews. We figure it's always set review time, so people want to hear about cards, so we just don't do one on that week. But you get to do that, you get to have conversations. This week, one of the things that went on in the Discord was people asked if we we unbanned Splinter Twin, because that's a solemn day for everyone. But someone was like, well, would this help with the Uro Omnath problem? And we kind of had a conversation, and we kind of landed on maybe it would actually hurt the other decks in the format, like Hammer Time, that are trying to beat Uro and Omnath, and it's just actually too many angles for them. So got a lot of cool things going on there if you want to support the show like that. But let's hop right into the Kaldheim Pick 2 set review. If you've never listened to Constructed Criticism before, we're glad to have you. The way we do our set review is a little different than every other show. We have 5 categories, and we pick 2 cards each per category. So it's still like a top 10 list, but instead of having to be this is number 10, number 9, and that means we're kind of hopeful that they'll be good, and no one's really talking about these cards, and you have to figure out the subcontext, or we have to explain it to you. We just pick categories and talk about 2 cards for that. That way it frames a better context for you, and actually allows us to talk about cards that maybe we would actually miss if we were trying to do most efficient cards in Kaldheim. Number 10, 1 mana kill spell. Those sort of things just kind of ruin it. And so we get to talk about a lot of cool things. So for today's 5 categories, we have Sleeper, cards we're hyped to play with, Double Face card, Hopeful, and Hit. And I will say a little bit about each of those sections as we hop into it. But Allie, would you like to start us off with your sleepers?
Sure. I'm actually going to surprise a ton of people by having a lot of white cards on my list today.
The white cards seem really good in this set.
Yeah. I normally don't like white, and there's the whole white sucks meme, but I like a lot of these cards actually. Mm-hmm. So my first sleeper is Kaldheim Unleashed. Is 2 white sorcery. Create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and cost. It's XX white.
Right. Allie, we tell everyone what Foretell is real quick before we go forward, just because people might not know what that mechanic is, that they've been kind of trying to stay low on spoilers.
Yeah, so Foretell is a new Kaldheim mechanic, and it's during your turn you may pay 2 and exile this card from your hand face down. Cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. So on your turn 2, you can pay 2 mana and just sneak this on the side of your battlefield, and then play later when you have just an absurd amount of mana and make a million angels.
Yeah. The weird part is it's face down, kind of like a morph. So you would know, but your opponent will not know, which is kind of a cool sub game. So are you hyped for this card? Do you think it's the next Entreat the Angels? Was that where the hype's coming from? What are you wanting to do with this?
Yeah, that was kind of my thought, especially when I saw the actual Foretell cost of XX white compared to that. I just think the Foretell mechanic overall is really good and probably really powerful. It seems just like awesome to kind of save these spells for later and be able to like cast them for cheaper, or like this card cast it like for an X cost so you can add something cool to the original like sorcery part of the card. And yeah, I, I am mostly excited for this in historic, but I could still also see this being really cool in standard as well.
What are you wanting to do with it in historic, like Lotus Field stuff, or
My like first thought was like, oh, like Azorius control like probably needed like something like this, like one or two copies of this. I know they have Amaria's some my like first thought was like, oh, like Azorius control like probably needed like something like this, like one or two copies of this. I know they have Amaria's something from
Amelia's
Zendikar.
Call, I believe is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one.
Mm.
Like already have this one, but something like this seemed really cool in that deck when there's often not a whole lot you want to do on turn two anyway, just like something to be mana efficient on each one of your turns. Sounded like cool to me. And then of course the Lotus Field decks, like you said, I think those decks get a lot better with all these foretell cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Like a
very.
million angels with your 4 Lotus Fields in play.
Yeah, and it works so nicely in the curve too, right? It's like if you play Lotus Field, you're like normally on the if you're doing it on curve, you're not going to have many plays where you're able to hold up mana. So the foretell kind of works like just like okay, mana to set up with this Lotus Field next turn, go, and that's assuming you don't have the Blood Sun to cheat out the Lotus Field, right? Where then it's just insane. Where it's just like, yeah, I got to foretell this thing for free. I still have like 5 mana up on turn, 4 or whatever. It's just absurd.
Yeah, it's just like super good in that deck too, because there's not often like a actual like turn to play you realistically have, or if you are casting like or playing a fair Lotus Field and just like get rid of 2 mana, you really want to do something with your 2 mana, so
Yeah, and
you
also
can foretell something.
100%, yeah. And like, heaven forbid your deck plays other foretell cards they have to think about, right? Like, there's a wrath, there's a draw spell, there's a counter spell. There's creatures that are foretold as well that have flash. I think there's only actually one that has flash, but either way, there's a lot of things for them to think about. And if your deck can afford to play any of the other ones, that instantly becomes really scary, in certain situations. And I think the front half of this card is like I wouldn't put that in my deck, but 4 mana for a 4/4 is pretty good. Like if Questing Beast is gonna come down, or maybe you're just like cold to a Questing Beast, right? Like you'd probably just spend the mana to not die, So I think this card's pretty cool. What's your
Yeah,
other card?
I really like it. My other card, I think this is another white card. It was. Rally the Ranks. It's 1 and a white enchantment. As Rally the Ranks enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Um, I just know in the past, a lot of these kind of anthem enchantments have been relatively strong in standard, and I think the cool part about this is like one choosing the creature type, and then if there ends up being a mirror situation, your creatures just end up winning because it's the creatures you control of the chosen type. So I thought that was really cool and something that because it's the creatures you control of the chosen type. So I thought that was really cool and something that I hadn't really seen before.
Mm. Yeah, that is a super interesting card in limited, and it's like really interesting constructed. Where how can we get types to overlap, or where can I find the thing? Like I want to play a warriors deck, right? What warrior can I get to fill this role so that it does benefit from this? And then weird things like shapeshifting come up, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I like accidentally took your creature, it turned out as a shapeshifter, and it just gets +1/+1. It's just cool, just efficient too. It's just nice.
Yeah, I know it's not the most like flashy card, but I've definitely just like haven't heard a lot of discussion around it, and it definitely seems like it can be a contender in any kind of format, really, if you're trying to do like some kind of tribal thing.
Yeah, I think these effects often don't get a lot of like maybe not rightfully so, but like understandably, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, I put this in my like deck that attacks people, cool, and like it doesn't induce a lot of thought um, outside of that. But I think these effects are normally pretty good. And to what you said about like people not really talking about it, there's like a lot of really good white cards in Kaldheim, just like we mentioned before, and a lot of them are warriors actually. Like if you go and look at it, I'm going to talk about three different white cards that until I actually started looking to build decks for Card Kingdom, I didn't realize they were all warriors, and they were cards I wanted to put in my deck. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to play all these cards that are warriors, and I have some other aggressive cards that are warriors from other sets, like Season Hollow Blade, for example, like, well, maybe I just want this because I have like an indestructible 4/2 now, right? It's just like, oh, this is the sort of thing that like I get to randomly play on my deck and it helps do what my deck wants to do anyways. So I think it's cool, even if it doesn't get a 900 word thesis on how it's going to change Magic. I'm going to start with my first sleeper, and it's actually a card that I think works perfectly with this. And we didn't set this up; it's so good how it works out. Usher the Fallen. It's white for a creature spirit warrior 2/1, and it has Boast 1 and a white. And if you pay that cost, you create a white 1/1 human warrior creature token. And so the way Boast works is you can activate this ability only if you've attacked this turn and only once per turn. So it's kind of like, okay, tap this creature, and then you can use its ability, but it has to specifically attack. You can't actually just tap it. And I think this card is like not the most exciting card in the world, just kind of like your Legion's card as well, or sorry, rather the ranks. I always call it Legion the ranks, which is just not a sensical name. But either way, it just goes with that sort of deck, right? Like, well, this card will provide an army on its own, and White hasn't really had many good aggressively offensive cards recently. They've had a lot of weird things like giant kill those and have access to them, but they're more defensive and reactionary, right? And this sort of card says attack, and hey, if you're flooding out, I got you. If you need to fill some extra mana, I got you. And so I think this card's good enough to if there is like a white aggro deck in Historic as well, I could go back to there. But I think it opens the door for something constructed as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have been kind of itching to find the mono white deck again that was really popular in like Guilds of Ravnica Standard. Mm-hmm. And 2/1 Boast, very cool. Yeah. I like this card too.
Yeah, a little sleeper. Not gonna be the coolest person at the party, but they're gonna bring it. This card though, I feel like no one's really talking about this card publicly, but then I see a lot of deck lists shared about this card in like DMs. So I don't know if this is like we got the hot secret that no one wants you to know, But
yeah. I currently have messed on my Discord about deck lists including this card, so I think that's a good snipe, Mason.
Yeah, we're gonna let the people know. Deck builders hate for us to tell you this secret card. Goldspan Dragon. So it's 3 red for a creature dragon, 4/4. It has flying and haste, and whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. And then it has treasures you control have tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. So I heard an interesting comparison of this card as fair Nissa Who Shakes the World when it comes to the mana half, right? Like, you play this card, and you will almost always get 2 mana. There are very few things that can kill this once it hits the battlefield that will not get you your 2 mana. And then you can play things like Negate or whatever along with this card. And, like, you can kind of play a Protect the Queen strategy while also having ways to go over the top with, like, or whatever along with this card. And, like, you can kind of play a Protect the Queen strategy while also having ways to go over the top with, like, you can use Gadwick or whatever. But basically, the card actually opens up having a bunch of mana on the turn that you play and able to protect it. And then the following turns, it really starts to get out of hand. And it also has a weird thing where if it becomes the target of a spell, like, it doesn't say your opponent's spells. So if you want to get weird with it, you can, like, target it with things that you could pick back up again. Like, if there's an escape card that's like a pump spell, you could do that sort of thing, right? And there's a lot of weird things that come up along those lines that you can do with Goldspan Dragon. And I think it's just a really weirdly strong card.
Yeah, I really want to play this, like, before turn 5. I'm just trying to think of, like, is there any kind of ramp cards left in Standard or legal or anything? Can we play this sooner than turn 5?
So there are 2. So one is Iron Crag Feat, so you're cheating 1 mana, right? But in theory, like maybe your deck wants to play Ironcrag Feet already. Like maybe you'd play Ugin or something, so you could benefit from the extra mana as well, and you're less trying to protect the dragon. And then there's a new card called Clear the Pathway, which adds 2 mana of 2 different colors to your mana pool for 3, or it can +1/+0 your team. Uh, so those are the only rituals we really have. Like if you want to stay like predominantly red as a deck, but I think you could still like if you want to be like a Gruul deck or whatever, right? That's like trying to be a little bit bigger. There's still like random elves that you could play. Random like I think we have Cultivate still in standard, even though it hasn't seen that much play in the format. So I think there are definitely ways to get to this card. And actually, now that we're saying that, Cultivate, this thing attacks the next turn of your Genesis Ultimatum before combat is pretty good.
Ugh,
Sounds
I
like you
like
love
that.
that. Yeah.
Well, like ramp or like stuff like that has never been like my favorite archetype, but it's always been one I just enjoy to come back to at some point. So I dig that. That's cool.
For sure. Yeah. I'm excited to play with this card, and I think I like the way this card's going. Right, like when it comes to direction, it's strong. It like incentivizes you to build stuff, but it's not. It doesn't feel like Nissa Who Shakes the World that would just win the game on its own. You know, which is cool. Like that's kind of what I'm looking for. All right, our next section is hyped. These are cards that we are hyped about. We are excited to play with. We think they're just really cool or whatever. Maybe they're not the strongest cards in the world, but the cards we're hyped about. And Allie, take us away with your hype cards.
So my first hype card is Mystic Reflection. So 1 and a blue. It's an instant. Choose target non-legendary creature. It's an instant. Choose target non-legendary creature. The next time one or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. It's Foretell for a blue mana. And I don't know, this card seems so unbelievably weird and can function in like so many different ways based on how you're trying to like play this card or what your deck looks like or how you're trying to interact with your opponent. And I I don't even know where to start with this card, but it makes me really hyped just kind of thinking about what we can possibly do with this.
Yeah, this thing's really cool. The coolest thing I've heard when it comes to any format is this plus Avenger of Zendikar. You like target it, get all the
I dig
plants,
that, yeah.
and you get all the plants again,
That, yeah.
and you get all the plants again. It's a Splinter Twin
Oh,
situation.
wow. Love Splinter Twin situations.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus.
I'm trying to think of what in Historic, because Historic's got that big card pool, makes a
Is
bunch
that
of
just like
tokens.
infinite creatures?
No, so the way it works is you'll get the first instance of tokens will all become Avengers, and all of the Avengers that are now tokens will make plant tokens for you, but they will not go off forever by the templating of that card. But you get
Okay.
like I don't know, if you have 7 lands, you get 8 Avengers Zendikars, and then 7 of those makes more tokens. So you have 49 plant tokens, right? Just casually.
So it's like with cast or play Avenger, trigger on the stack, do this. They're all Avengers, and then they make plants.
Yeah, it'd be the same thing as if
Very
like you
cool.
played Woe Strider and responded to the make a goat trigger.
Avengers, and then they make plants.
Yeah, it'd be the same thing as if
Very
like you
cool.
played Woe Strider and responded to the make a goat trigger. Then you'd have 2 Woe Striders.
Ooh.
That's so much value.
Yeah. So I mean, like, that's I think where a lot of people's mind jump is like, let's do something really stupid with this card, and I'm all for it. But I think I don't want to like misread the card.
It is a weird card.
To enter. So like I can even see that as like your opponent is trying to cast something very scary, and you're like, oh well, I don't want that to happen, so I can cast this, and now my opponent's Ugin enters as a Woe Strider or something or whatever.
Yeah, that would work. I just realized I did the Woe Strider thing, but Woe Strider's like a
Love Grixis sacrifice.
We get then we can turn our Nico Bolas Ravengers. Whoa. Yeah, this it's funny. I was reading the card again too to make sure I had it right. It works with the Goldspan Dragon as well because you would target it, the dragon, so you get 2 mana, so it's like free or whatever, and then you would get 2 dragons, which would obviously get out of hand pretty quickly too. I wonder if there's something there where you can like, wombo combo, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm hyped for this card because it's really weird and you can do a lot of probably really messed up stuff or protect yourself from your opponent doing something messed up, I suppose. But oh yeah, I don't know if it fits anywhere specifically, but thinking about it, like this card's just cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super cool.
About it, like this card's just cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super cool. It's also if your deck wants to play that and it can afford to play other foretell cards too, like maybe you're a control combo deck, that's a weird one to have access to in your like foretell zone, right? Where like that ability can come up to hurt your opponent in weird ways. And then they decide to play around like, okay, well, what if my Vorinclex becomes a goat? Like, what do I do then? So,
Yeah.
It's cool. What's your other card?
All right, we got Pyre. Is it Pyre? I don't know how to pronounce any of the cards in the set.
I believe that is how you say Pyre.
Of Heroes.
Yeah.
Just 2 generic mana. It's an artifact. And you can pay 2 generic mana and tap it and sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature and has the only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So TLDR is just Birthing Pod, but for tribal synergies. And once again, I have no idea what this does in any capacity, in any like constructed format, but I missed out on Pod when it was legal in Modern, and I will not miss out on it again. This card is really cool.
I'm sorry, Allison, are you saying you're going to play Modern? Is that what you just said?
I don't know about Modern, but
thought I had
maybe.
Yeah.
You can just like. Oh, that requires you to have a 5-drop goblin to get Muxus, though. I was like, oh, you can just tutor Muxus.
Well, you can get Kiki Jiki. Oh, you mean in historic. Sorry. I had a moment. There's Siege Gang Commander, Allie. There you go. Gang Commander, Allie. There you go.
Yeah, I guess you can, like, roll up the chain, just play, like, 1, so you can activate it again next turn to get, Muxus.
Yeah.
Plus, my brain doesn't work this late at night, Mason.
Sorry. Yes, Siege Gang also is nice with the tokens, right? So you have a residual body, and it's not like a bad card. If you want to go that route, or you should go that route, Siege Gang's probably the 5-drop choice. Yeah, I'm not going to attempt to say I know anything. I read that card, thought it's probably good enough for something. I'm going to let someone figure out the triad that you're supposed to go up the chain with, and I will net deck them. So, I don't have a lot to say on this card, unfortunately, except I'm sure that eventually this card will see play in something. There's just the way these things go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my hype cards are definitely, I am not smart enough to figure this out right now, but I really, really hope someone else is and does, because definitely I am not smart enough to figure this out right now, but I really, really hope someone else is and does, because these cards are, like, really cool. I don't know. I enjoy them.
Yeah, they're definitely dope. I'm curious to see. I forgot the name of the shark one. Is Mystic something? The Mystical Reflection. I'm excited to see what.
Yeah, Mystic Reflection.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what people do with that one. I have no clue. I'm sure people will just do something broken with Pyre. But I want to see the cool stuff.
I love the cool broken things that are hopefully going to happen with these cards and then get brutally ripped away from me.
Yep. Alright, so my first hype card is Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. It's 4 green for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Parator, with Trample and Haste. and it has some abilities. And so I'm gonna read the two abilities, and I'm gonna kind of say what they do again because I think it's a little confusing, at least the first time I read it. So the first ability is if you would put one or more counters on a permanent or a player, put twice that many of each of those kind of counters on that permanent or player instead. So it's doubling season for like loyalty and stuff like that, infect, etc. Dope. The other mode is if an opponent would put one or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half the many of counters rounded down. So if you had a, let's say, a planeswalker and had a +1, you would get the ability, but you would get no loyalty because 1 divided by 2 is 0. Or it rounds down because it can't round up. So you get no loyalty basically. And so like sagas don't work. Like your opponent's Great Hinge won't put a stats and a lot of good things going. And has the potential to do some busted stuff, right? Because it is like a doubling season for planeswalkers. So like you can play this, play your Ugin ults where your Nissa goes and grabs a bunch of lands, etc., etc. And like the thing that I thought is best is one of the best is Grurik Wildspeaker, the 4-mana one that's in standard. It goes up to 8, so it ults, and then every turn you can grab a creature, so your deck will always have a Vorinclex, because if they kill it, you just grab another one. So you can do a lot of really cool things, and then incidentally, if you start looking at a game, specifically standard, there's a lot of random counters being added on things, and getting double that or negating theirs, I think is really powerful. And you don't have to like go out of your way to do it. You know, like if you have Wicked Wolf in your green deck that wants to play Vorinclex, seems reasonable. They're both like efficient green cards. Now your Wolf suddenly getting more counters for no reason. Or your escape cards to counter your Wolf suddenly getting more counters for no reason. Or your escape cards to counter rogues are getting more counters. You know, and I think that sort of thing is close to being good enough while also being a Planeswalker hate piece. And if Planeswalkers get too strong, you're going to have Vorinclex to check them. So I think this card's cool.
I think this card is cool. I also just keep thinking about historic, and there's so many like almost there counters decks, and maybe this is something that can help kind of push that over the edge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know how it works with whining constrictors and stuff, but I think like if you had that in your deck and you had one counter, I think the way it works is that you would get 2 because of Vorinclex, and then the snake tries to put another one, but then Vorinclex doubles it, so you would get 4 counters, which is kind of sick.
I love playing on Arena. It's gonna do it all for me, so I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, Hard Skills
do it all for me, so I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, Hard Skills is one of the hardest decks in Magic until you play on Arena, and then suddenly all you have to do is count, right? Oh man, yeah, I like that card a lot. I think that one's really exciting. And then my other one is Nico Aris, which is a new Planeswalker. Their casting cost, is X white blue blue with 3 loyalty. And Nico Aris has a passive ability that when you cast Nico Aris as it enters the battlefield, you create X shard tokens equal to the X that you spent to cast Nico Aris. And a shard token is an enchantment that you sacrifice for paying 2 mana, and then you scry 1, draw 1. So you essentially pay for a clue, but the clue lets you scry first. So I think that's pretty cool as like just a thing. But then where it gets kind of more interesting is Nico's plus ability to me. So Nico has a +1 of up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn to its owner's hand. Has a -1 of deal 2 damage to tapped target creature for each card you've drawn this turn, and then has -1 so you can make another shard token. When it comes to Nico Aris, to me, I think there's a lot of like focus and emphasis on like, oh, it's like another Sphinx's Revelation. That's what you're supposed to do with this card, and then like you plays in the battlefield and you kill something because you made all these shards. But I think that you want to play Nico in a deck that like can do that if the game goes long, but has some way to abuse its +1. And I think the answer to that is Yorion. I think if you just have like 1 of these or 2 of these in your Yorion deck, your deck will probably go long because Yorion decks typically do that sort of thing. And then anytime you get to cast Yorion in your Yorion decks, it's normally very good. So letting it like attack a Planeswalker because it's unblockable, or nug them for 4 and then you get to blink everything, is normally lights out. And that sort of And that sort of thing is really, really strong, in my opinion, as a plus for a Planeswalker, right? Like, if this thing read, deal 4 damage to your opponent, flicker all your permanents that you want to, you'd be very happy about that plus. So, I think Nikaru, specifically in a Yorion deck, is going to be really strong and really good. Um, and I'm hyped to do that. I just think there's a lot of really cool things you can do there. And I imagine with this whole package, there's a lot more there. But that one interaction, I think, is enough to push this card into like the probably playable, gonna be kind of crazy when it happens.
Ugh,
You don't.
that's so gross.
I thought you
I
liked the
want
Doom
to
mirrors.
do that now.
Yeah, I honestly think at 3 mana, this card is like pretty close to playable. Like if you can make the +1 matter, and I also think that Archon, I think it's Archon of Sun's Grace, the 3/4, is pretty good. Make sure you hit them. It's kind of good enough of the time. So I don't know. I think on its base, it's just strong, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Teferi Time Raveler is like a completely different and messed up card, but like in the Yorion thing, you're often just like playing Teferi and bouncing your own Yorion anyway, just to like replay it. So I think even that +1 is just good enough.
Yeah. And heaven forbid you can like in the late game play it and you can get a couple shards, right? Just to like have that lying around. Like if you're flooding out and you draw this card and you're like, oh, I'll spend 4 mana or whatever to play this. So it's just even one more card, right? But then your Yorion goes off and it's just like, okay, we were top decking. I used all of my mana on turn 12, whatever, when we're both top decking, and I redid all my things. Like, I do not know how your opponents are supposed to beat that ever. And that's like the way the Yorion deck, not know how your opponents are supposed to beat that ever. And that's like the way the Yorion decks always lose, right? It's like they trade resources forever and they just like hit too many lands, or like the opponent, got their Ox of Agonis first or whatever. And this is just like a thing that stops you from dying in the early game and takes over in the late game. So seems good. I don't know. No one's talking about this card. It makes me feel like I'm a crazy person when I see no one talking about it.
Yeah, I didn't catch the implications with Yorion. I like that a lot.
All right. Well, let's move on to the double face cards. This is just a section all about double face cards. Sometimes we like to have one that's specific to a set, or something along those natures. And I'll take the lead here, Allie, since you've been the one firing everything else off for us. And my first double face card is, I hope I'm going to say this right, Redain, God of the Worthy. It's 2 and a white for I hope I'm going to say this right, Redain, God of the Worthy. It's 2 and a white for a legendary creature god. It has flying and vigilance, and has no lands your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped. Non-creature spells your opponent casts with converted mana cost 4 or greater cost 2 more to cast as the front half. Then its back half is Valkmir Protector Shield, which I think I somehow butchered as well, despite knowing 2 of those words at least. And it's 3 and a white for a legendary artifact, and it says if a source an opponent control would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent 1 of that damage. And whenever you or another permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, that player must spend 1 mana or counter that spell or ability. So there's like a Thalia type tax on the back that also, reduces damage. And I think what I really like about the gods in general is that you can play a lot of the gods and you don't get punished for having all these legendary creatures in your deck, right? Because your second copy on the front half, I think, is a random snow hate piece, which I like because I hate that like it's optimal if this card didn't exist to play all snow basics. So now there's reasons to not play snow basics because this card might be in your opponent's deck and suddenly you're playing off curve. But also its other ability of non-creature spells that cost 4 or more costing 2 more is pretty huge, actually. I think a lot of the times you forget how good those taxing effects are until the moment that they really, really matter. And I think the card on rate, just kind of like from there, is pretty close to good. And then you have this fail-safe of like, okay, on the back half, my opponents are going to do less damage and have to spend more mana to cast their spells that target me, etc., etc. And I think 1 damage getting taken away seems like not a lot, until suddenly you think about, okay, what if all my creatures had 1 less power? How much would that matter? And I think in a lot of decks it would matter a lot. So I'm kind of a believer in this card, right? Because you'd have to pay.
Please no.
You have to pay one so they do 0 damage. That's kind of funny. I didn't think about that. Oh, that's really
See, this is
funny.
why this is a great podcast. You think about standard, and I think about historic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of things in historic that cost 4 or more. Like, even just your opponent's collected company, right? Like, in an aggressive mirror. Or their Ember Cleave. Like, making that cost 2 more. It's kind of huge.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, you could probably find, like, clips of all the times I've tried to, like, cast something and then been like, oh, wait, ECD Chapter 2 just went off. This ruined my whole turn. And
Yeah.
that's just, like, always, though, for 4 or greater.
Yeah, it seems just strong to me, and it has like an body. It's nothing that you're gonna write home about, but flying and vigilance. That's 2 good keywords to have as like a combo. So it's gonna lock down the skies most of the time in the early game as well, which is cool. Body. It's nothing that you're gonna write home about, but flying and vigilance. That's 2 good keywords to have as like a combo. So it's gonna lock down the skies most of the time in the early game as well, which is cool. Next, I mentioned him at the start of the podcast. It's Valki, the God of Lies. So Valki, God of Lies, it's 1 to black for legendary creature God, which we actually mentioned on the podcast last week. When Valki enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card. They revealed this way until Valki leaves, and then you can spend X mana, choose a creature card exiled with Valki's ability with converted mana cost X. Valki becomes a copy of that card. And then you can have the backside of Valki, which is Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter. For 5 red-black, you get a legendary planeswalker Tybalt that has the passive of, as Tybalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem. You may play cards exile Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter abilities as though they were mana of any color. So you can cast any spells that your Tybalt will exile from your opponents for the rest of the game as long as you control Tybalt. You get +2 to exile the top card of each player's library. You -3 exile target artifact or creature, and -8 exile all cards from all graveyards. Add red, red, red to your mana pool, and then it has 5 loyalty. I think this card's pretty strong before we even get into the Cascade part for Eternal formats, which I'll get to in 1 second. We mentioned this in the podcast last week, but I think it's just kind of good on rate on the front half of the Valki, and then you get Tybalt on the back for free when you flood out and your opponent has no hand, and you don't want to be doing that sort of thing. And then when it comes to Modern, for Jund, and Sultai, etc., the fact that you can cast your Bloodbraid Elves or, whatever Cascade spell you want to play, and you can hit Valki but then cast Tybalt, I think is a pretty huge play. Whether Valki's good enough for base Modern, I don't know, but I know base Modern has a lot of creatures you actually... whether Valki's good enough for base Modern, I don't know, but I know base Modern has a lot of creatures you actually wouldn't mind getting rid of, including Uro, which is kind of a hate card too. So I could actually see this card making a splash in Modern, at least as long as Uro's around.
Yeah, I am so excited to take an Uro with this card. This was also one of my picks for the double face cards.
Mm-hmm.
This card makes me really happy. I wrote about it a lot this week.
Ooh, where can they find that?
Similar to where the Mason Clark writes, I also write for Card Kingdom, and my article's focusing on 5 cards I like for Historic, which will be out on Friday.
You love to hear
I don't know when the podcast is coming out, so maybe that's in the future, maybe it's in the past.
It's probably coming out late tonight, the time which we're recording this, which is Wednesday. But I did work 11 hours at work today before coming. Yeah, so do you have anything else you want to say? Because, like you said, Valki was one of your cards, so I'm going to kind of let you pick up from there on your last double face card or finish anything with Valki. I think it's going to see Modern play. Whether it will stick around after seeing some light Modern play is the question.
Yeah, the Bloodbraid Elf thing is very enticing to me in like Modern or Eternal formats. I am also just excited for it in Historic because we also have an Uro problem there. So I really just want to take an Uro with this card, and I'm very excited. And then I think specifically if you look at like sacrifice decks in Historic that can actually like cast Tybalt as well if it gets to like turn 7 or whatever and you have all the mana, then it's kind of like why not? This is just something we can do if it's kind of like Why not? This is just something we can do if our opponent is empty-handed and casting Valky is no longer good.
That's true. I didn't think about the sacrifice mirror until you started talking more about red black, but I cannot imagine turn two take my opponent's mayhem devil. Uh, like that's really good. Mayhem
I
devil
have
is
a
what.
Mayhem Devil now.
Yeah, the thing you don't want in the mirror is to have your opponent play a mayhem devil, and normally you kill mayhem devils with like your claim the firstborns or your devils trading. So heaven forbid that you have to use one of your devils to get your devil back. Like that seems miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Woof. That's heavy. All right. So what's your other double face card?
Alright, backing out my second doubles face card. Oh, I clicked the wrong thing. No, come back. Okay. Isika, God. She's a god creature with vigilance. You can tap and add 1 mana of any color. Other legendary creatures you control have vigilance and tap add 1 mana of any color. And then the back half is the prismatic bridge with really pretty art. And it's white, blue, black, red, green. Legendary enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is kind of another one where I don't know where I'm actually going to play this card, but I love doing things at random. And I love 5-color nonsense sometimes. So I feel like there's a bunch of decks that already are doing like visit thing. So this just seems like a cool addition. Can flip into free spells. I love free spells, Mason.
If it's free, it's you. Yeah. Was that clever enough for you? All right, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Mason, you're so funny.
Thanks. I love the script. Anyways, yeah, I think that card's pretty cool. I have no clue what to. That's one of those cards where it's just like there are so many options that I'm gonna let someone else figure it out, and then I will have my fun with that card. You know?
Yeah,
Just,
I think this has been the first set in a while where like all the cards are really cool, but I have no idea what to do with them.
yeah, they're all very interesting cards, and the fact that so many of the high rarity cards are double face this time, but instead of being lands, high rarity cards are double face this time, but instead of being lands, which is just like a good rate thing last time, they all have words now and do things, makes it so much harder. And they kind of knew, so they kind of made all the things contextual. So it's like I have no clue what like.
Oh no!
It is just beyond reason. It's bizarre. Um, I'm literally trying to think of like a use case example of that card, where like you would like cascade into something, because that's essentially what it's doing, right? It's like cascade towards a legendary thing, and there are so many things, and I don't know, like it Nisu shakes the world. That's probably good enough. I don't know. You got other stuff in your deck that you can
Get
do.
Niv Mizzet.
Oh, yeah, that's what I should do with it. That's actually just good enough, right? Like if you play it for the Niv Mizzet half, it hits like Niv Mizzet wherever your walker is, or I guess an Oath of Kaya, and then the front half lets you cast Niv Mizzet. That's probably just what you're supposed to do with it. Like that's like at least. That's insane.
Yeah. Well, okay, so reveal creature or planeswalker. So I mean that's either like really just hitting itself or Niv Mizzet in a lot of those decks, or like another ramp creature, I suppose. But
Or Oath of Kaya. Oath's legendary.
there you go.
Hey, I'm not gonna knock an Oath of Kaya. I like an Oath of Kaya. Is there anything else you want to say about this card before we move on to our hopeful cards?
It's weird. Someone please figure out what to do with it.
That's right.
I want to cast it.
Well, there we go. Let's move on to our hopefuls. And Allie, you can start us off here with our hopefuls. But for those at home, hopefuls are cards that we think are really close to like getting there in constructed, and we really want them to. But it's not like a hit, which is our last category, are cards we are think. But a hopeful is one that We really want it to, and it probably will, but we just don't have it quite there yet, and it could miss. So, Allie, what do you have?
My first one is King Narfi's Betrayal. It's one blue-black saga. Chapter 1 is each player mills 4 cards, then you may exile a creature or planeswalker card from each graveyard. And then 2 and 3 are until end of turn, you may cast spells from among the cards exiled with King Narfi's Betrayal, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast those spells. So I guess to me, this card is really cool, and I really like the idea of playing this in, that's right, Yorion decks, because I have a Yorion problem now and a Doom Foretold problem, and I love sagas, and it's okay, but I think that this is sagas, and it's okay, but I think that this is hopeful for me because I can see a lot of situations where like you kind of have to rely on your opponent having like a creature or planeswalker in their deck that is worth casting, I guess, especially when you are pretty low on creatures and planeswalkers yourself in kind of the Yorion decks. You're a lot of just enchantments for the most part outside of Yorion, so I can also just see this whiffing and ending very terribly if your opponent's deck is not good enough.
Yeah. I do like that it has each player mill 4, but it doesn't have to be from the milled cards, right? It's not like, and pick one of those cards. So you could, like, be like, oh, I really need that, Valky or whatever, Valky or whatever, Doomblade it, play this. All right, next turn I'm Valkying, Um, and with by the way, with the gods, I believe how it works is you would be able to cast the back half once they've been selected. So that is some extra wombo combo potential.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Maybe rogues could play it and do more of the Zareth San thing without committing to a 5-drop.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. What's your other card? I don't have a lot to say on that one, by the way. I think you nailed it.
I thought that card was really cool, so I'm hopeful it does something because it's just cool.
It is super
playing.
Cool.
I love playing my opponent's cards. That's one of my favorite things. That's why I love Hearthstone.
It's because you get to play all your opponent's stuff.
Yeah, and it's random.
XD.
Okay, my second hopeful. Yeah, and it's random.
XD.
Okay, my second hopeful. I'm not like too hopeful on this one, but I think it would be really cool if it did anything. It was Tybalt's Trickery, which is 1 and a red instant. Counter target spell. Choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that spell without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in any order. I am mistakenly hoping to put an Emrakul into play for 3 mana. It's not good, but I want it so bad, Mason.
I find this card interesting. How red would get a counter spell, right? This card is just so weird. It like
that's because Tybalt's on it.
That's so true. Tybalt be crazy. I don't know. It's weird because like in older formats, like you can like cascade. You hit this, you counter your own cascade spell, and you cast your Emrakul, right? Like that. That's it. That's the deck. Your whole deck is this Emrakul and cascade. That's all you do. But like those formats have so many cards that are so good at stopping them. But I still see people excited to go, and if there's a will, there's a way. So it's interesting. I don't know. I guess in a way it helps protect itself from some of those if you have enough mana to hold up the second Tybalt's Trickery. So I don't know. Do you have anything you want to do with this in Historic? Do you have any like? Is there anything?
I could like maybe see it in some of like the Lotus Field decks too, just because you have access to so much mana and you can, I don't know, cascade into something cool.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well,
Okay, that was pretty
I, I don't have anything else to say on Tybalt's trickery.
How
I,
dare you not be hopeful for this card, Mason?
I just think about force and negation, and I think about like, oh, Teferi 3, and it says you may cast the card, so like I can't even cast it because of Teferi 3 because it's so much fun as a Magic card. So
See, this is why I play Historic.
I will say having to play against Teferi 3 does make me question the amount of Modern I play, but whatever, not the end of the world. All right. Well, Allie is playing with red cards that don't do anything, and they're XD random. He is playing with red cards that don't do anything, and they're XD random. Hee hee. I'm over here, a complete and utter Chad with Arnie Brokenbrow. 2 in a red, legendary creature, human, berserker, 3/3. Has haste, and has boast for 1. You may change Arnie Brokenbrow's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control until the end of turn. So, Arnie Brokenbrow works very nice with the Home Slice Annex, because Annex is big, and then Arnie Brokenbrow will be big. And then Rimrock Knight makes your other creatures big, and then Arnie also gets a buff. And then Bonecrusher Giant's bigger than Arnie, and now Arnie's attacking for 5. And so, I think this card is like a good couple slots in a red deck. Red really needs some help in standard as being a solo color. Right now it's kind of relegated to always being a backup color, specifically for Gruul. And
Cards, not Tybalt cards. Mason hates fun.
Arnie Brokenbrow is a fun time. You ever Rimrock Knight your Annex and then attack with Arnie Brokenbrow, and now your Annex is like a 9, but your Arnie's a 10? And then you Embercleave? Pew pew!
Beep beep.
Pew pew! And the Annex is bigger because you Embercleaved, and then Arnie's bigger? Anyways, Resplendent Marshal's my other card. 1 white for a creature angel warrior. It has flying and it's a 3/3. When Resplendent Marshal enters the battlefield or dies, you may exile another creature card from your graveyard. When you do, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control other than Resplendent Marshal that shares a creature type with the exiled card. So the easy spot to put this would be Warriors and Angels, because this card's a Warrior and an Angel, and in theory some of these will die and use the other ones to fuel it. But it is a like Anthem effect that they all share, so you can buff them up. And I do think this card is really, really close, if not there, in Standard Warriors. I think Warriors is a archetype that has a lot of support, goes kind of wide. One of the cards I think really makes this doable is Season Hollowblade, which if you don't know off the top of your head is 1 white for a 3/1, and you may give it indestructible by discarding a card and tap it. So a lot of the times what happens is, you attack and then they try and block and you discard a card and it becomes indestructible. So Resplendent Marshal, I think works well with that card. I think a lot of the times you can, your opponent's going to try and kill it, or you can maybe block, or hold something back, or heck, even just discard a card to buff your team on board, right? Like, if I have 2 Resplendent Marshals, they're both not going to do anything until they die, which we'll talk about in a second. So I might as well get rid of one of them so I can get the power now and not later. And then it also has when it dies, and since it's a 3/3, if I play it on 3 and I don't get any triggers, it is a really big body. Resplendent Marshals, they're both not going to do anything until they die, which we'll talk about in a second. So I might as well get rid of one of them so I can get the power now and not later. And then it also has when it dies, and since it's a 3/3, if I play it on 3 and I don't get any triggers, it is a really big body, and my opponent has to kill it last, else I will, buff my team up. So, yeah, I think this card's just kind of really close to being there.
I agree. This card's really cool. It's a lot of text to put counters on things, but I do enjoy it.
Yeah, I think Conclave Mentor is another card that I believe is really close. And while the Mentor, I think, is just a Centaur or something like that, so it doesn't show the warrior type, there could be some really cool stuff with that in Standard. So, I think keep your eye on this card. I think this card is like as good as Unbreakable Formation with much higher ceiling most of the time. So Resplendent Marshal. All right, Allie. Our hits are our cards that we think are going to be big players in a format. They're going to do something for sure, maybe even define a format. And I'll start us off with one of my favorite cards from the set, if not my favorite. I just love this card so much. It's Sigrid, God Favored. It's 1 white, legendary creature, human warrior, 2/2. It has flash, and it has first strike and protection from gods, which is weird because she's God favored. I don't understand it. Either way, when Sigrid enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 attacking or blocking creature until Sigrid leaves the battlefield. So I think in like a white base aggressive deck, this is a card that you could kind of just play, and it's going to help you swing combats or whatever, and it's like got a pretty good body and allows you to like hold up mana against wraths as a white deck, which is something you can't normally do, and then flash this in. Against like Gruul decks, if your opponent tries to Embercleave you, you get to eat it. If your opponent attacks all out, and they have like maybe if your opponent tries to Embercleave you, you get to eat it. If your opponent attacks all out, and they have like maybe any creature with toughness 2 or less, you can flash this in, exile the other creature, and get a clean 2-for-1 with a block. And I think all of that is enough to have this card just be a solid card. They'll see a lot of play in mid-range or controlling based white decks. I think that's where it's best. But it also randomly has protection from gods. Some of the gods look to be close enough, and if you randomly get to high roll that in a match when you have a card you're already happy about, I think we have a recipe for a really powerful card.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think the white cards are actually really good in this set. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're trying to juice them up a little bit, and I think this card's just strong. Like, I imagine a lot of the times your Gruul opponent attacking, right? And it's like, okay, so I have Embercleave in my hand, my opponent has the mana up, right? And let's say they're a white mid-rangey deck that we know has Sigrid, right? Or commonly has. If they decide to, like, Sigrid, right, I have to respond with my Embercleave, and I have to put it on my weaker creature now. So, like, if I had, like, a bunch of creatures attacking, right? Like, let's say they were 3, then they're going to probably exile my Lovestruck Beast, so I can't Embercleave the Lovestruck Beast. And then I have these other 2 weaker creatures, and so my creature will probably trade with Sigrid, but that's still just like a lot of tempo gained, right? Like if you play that, you're basically blanking your opponent's combat set for the most part, and now they have to like work on moving this Embercleave around, and that can be really costly since Gruul is trying to be such a deck that's so efficient in curving out. And so I think about that play pattern. I think that's really strong. Its only real weakness is that it dies to Bonecrusher Giant, but even like against rogues, right? Like it eats all the rogues in combat that are on the ground, and it eats Dolores, and then it does exile it, right? So, like, maybe your deck doesn't have a clean answer to Flyers. Suddenly, the Soaring Thought Thief, it mills you for 2, and then it's exiled for a while. And now they have to play kind of card off the battlefield. And I think it's just strong. I don't know. It's just good. It just seems like a good card.
I would register that card.
You love to hear it. You really do. Hey, it works with the Doom Foretold, too, right? In your upkeep, flash her in, sacrifice it. I know you love it now. You're a big Doom Foretold here.
Yeah, this set makes me really excited for Yorion and Doom Foretold.
Yeah, I guess. Oh. Can you... I didn't read the card. Hang on. I wonder, can I exile my own, or is it only cards my opponent controls? Let me check again, because I could exile my own Yorion. When it enters battlefield, exile up to 1 target attacking blood creature. Yeah. So you could exile your own Yorions. I didn't think about that. That's funny.
Yorion.
Sick. All right, let's go. My other card is Joran, God of Winter. 2 in a green, 3/3 legendary snow creature god. When Joran...
Yorion.
Sick. All right, let's go. My other card is Joran, God of Winter. 2 in a green, 3/3 legendary snow creature god. When Joran attacks, untap each snow permanent you control. We'll get back to that in a second. And then we have the back half, which is Kaldheim the Rime Staff, which is 1 blue-black for a legendary snow artifact. And the artifact says you may tap it to put target snow permanent you control from your graveyard. So you can play target snow card from your graveyard this turn if you do it enters tap. So it lets you cast something. I think that back attack is really strong, and if your deck can play it, and we end up having enough stuff going on, then go for it. But where I think this card is best is like a green base deck where we can play a bunch of force and we can use the Jorion untap ability profitably. And it does kind of ask to have other cards. I think traditionally it's kind of a yikes, like if you're looking for just an inherently strong card, some ways. And if you can play like Jorion on 3, play like a Garruk Wildspeaker, buff the Jorion, like attack and then untap, and then even just play like a 2-drop, right? Just like maybe you play like an Ooze or something. I think that's really big. You can Gem Razor your Joran, so now it's a 4/4 and now it's bigger, can live, and then you can untap your Snowman to play another thing. There's like the Inscription, which is the kicker pump spell. So like you can make your Joran bigger and have it punch something, or you can Primal Might with Joran and then main phase 2 play a creature. I think there's just a lot of ways to actually push Joran through. And since Joran doesn't need to live in order to actually it doesn't need to connect or live to untap your snow permanents, it just needs to attack. So you can do things like play Vivian, and then normally your Vivian is locked into plussing, right? Because it's very rare that you can play Vivian and then be able to actually cast a spell to use the minus or the top ability from the static. But now I can throw away my Joran and untap my mana, and I can go get another Joran with a minus Viola. I think that sort of thing with Joran is really, really strong. And all these green decks can, thanks to Gilded Goose, incidentally make blue and black mana. And if you get to do that, you just randomly have infinite Jorans because of the back half. So I think this card's really strong. And heaven forbid if we figure out how to make a multicolored deck work with Joran, because I imagine that would be very, very strong. But
I want to have this just be a wilderness reclamation in combat.
Well, that's what it do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Expansion explosion you.
Yeah. I guess, is there a pump spell that costs X that it's an instant? Because that would get the job done, too. Yeah, I don't know. I think this card's messed up. That's all just with green, If there's a way to, realistically... It's all just with green, If there's a way to, realistically get value from it... I also just think the back half is probably a strong enough card on its own. And if your blue and black deck just high rolls a Triumph because you need more dual lands so we don't have a lot in standard, then and you randomly get Joran, I think that's also just probably good enough. Just replay some Snow Threat you have a bunch of times. It's just good. Card's good.
Yep.
All right, Allie, what are your hits?
My first one is Doomscar, which is 3 white sorcery, destroy all creatures. But wait, there's more. You can foretell it for 1 white. So essentially, it's a 3 mana board wipe. An unconditional board wipe. I think that's very good. Obviously, 4 or whatever, it's pretty awkward, but I don't know. I just picture having control deck or anything that just wants to have this board wipe. It feels like it's just an upgrade to most board wipes we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just good, right? Specifically for standard and historic, it's just a good card. It's gonna see play. Even if your opponent has a really good start and you spend turn 2 playing this and you have to spend turn 3 wrathing, I think that's really strong. And then I think when you get to wrath on turn 5, right, but you foretell it and then you're able to hold up mana, I think that play pattern is actually huge and not being talked about enough. Where I think a lot of decks, the way they beat control decks is they put pressure on board and then they diversify, right? And then once they're done diversifying, or if they can't diversify, they hold. And then they'll have a question to play post wrath as the way to put you on the back foot, and then you never catch up, right? And it's just so hard for you to climb back in. And Doomscar is all right, you set me, spend a bit of mana, now in the later turns, you get to clear the board and answer their next threat. And I think changing that paradigm puts a lot of pressure on the other players to figure out, okay, what do I do? Because that plan is really good, and if you stop that plan, if they normally don't have the follow-up, the control that can normally take over. So I think Doomscar is really, really good, and it's going to change the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I also, going back to the Lotus field deck in Historic, I think this card kind of just seals up a lot of the holes that it had of dying too quickly or having your 3 mana board wipes being like sweltering suns or anger of the gods just not being good enough, where you can do the same thing, or you can just like hide this away for later again. I really like the foretell cards in that deck specifically, like sweltering suns or anger of the gods just not being good enough, where you can do the same thing, or you can just like hide this away for later again. I really like the foretell cards in that deck specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And then there is the small thing which we haven't really talked about much, and I do think it's being overhyped a little bit, but it does come in, especially in games where your opponent's lower on resources and they can't afford to make a mistake like this. But when you foretell a card, like we mentioned earlier, your opponent doesn't know, right? So maybe you played the counter spell, maybe you played the draw spell, maybe you played the wrath, maybe you played the angel thing, right? And playing around all those cards can be kind of challenging. And if the deck can afford to play a couple of each of those, the opponents might just have to like pick their battles, right? If they pick the wrong battle, they can end up losing very, very hard. So they do get some added benefit the more of these foretell cards we get to play. And having another playable one like this, and such a powerful one, maybe the strongest foretell card if we're being honest, I think it's going to be a pain in a lot of people's sides. It's going to lead to a lot of really cool. I think it's going to be a pain in a lot of people's sides. It's going to lead to a lot of really cool stories too. So
Yeah.
What's your last card, Allie?
All right, my last card is Firja's Retribution. We have one white, white, black. Another saga, because I love them. First chapter is create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. Chapter 2 is until end of turn. Angels you control gain tap, destroy target creature with power less than this creature's power. And chapter 3 is angels you control gain double strike until end of turn. And as soon as I saw this, I wanted to flicker it with Yorion. And I mean, like, even without that, this card just seems really powerful, right? Like, it's 4 mana, you make a 4/4 with flying and vigilance. And then, so you're starting off proactive, and then the next kind of shifting stuff. If we're looking at, like, the Yorion decks, which are mostly reactive, this feels like it truly gives it, like, a good card to, like, supplement with something else to not only be reactive, but also have a kind of, like, proactive element to it by making these angels, and then you can just do that multiple times and flicker it or sacrifice it to Doom Foretold, and that's fine too.
Yeah, I think this card is just like pretty strong. Just like it's kind of hard to not say that, right? Like it's just kind of good on rate or whatever. And I think they've printed a lot of good angels early in the curve that maybe not a Yorion deck would want, but like other decks might want alongside this. Like Resplendent Marshal comes to mind, right? And maybe that won't do very much on a given board. But when you get that second chapter ticking up and you're starting to kill stuff, I could see this card really crushing it. So and that's like assuming that the Yorion or half of the card is right, which I think it is. I think it's very easy to set up having 2 4/4s out of this. And the first time around, your 4/4 kills something, and the second time around, your 2 4/4s clear the board, most likely, right? I think that's a big thing to overcome for the opponents. So yeah. And there's Yorion decks that got 80 cards. They gotta put something in there, right? Like, I don't know. So, yeah, I think this is good.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think this card is going to be absurd and limited, but
yeah, this limited format seems wild. Just really crazy. Outside the part where we have to draft snow basics. Boo. Don't like it. All right. Well, Allie, what a fun time here today. Are you excited to play with this set more so now?
Yeah, I am. I didn't really I don't really look at spoilers until we get like close to these kind of things, so I am definitely excited for a lot of these cards.
Exciting times. Well, if someone a week from the time they're hearing this, where can that be? Oh, are you in the early access streamer thing? Have they announced that? Can you say that yet? Where are we at with that?
That's next week, right? I did, yeah, I did just go on to Stream Elements and apply for it because I figured out I'm still in the creator program, I guess. So, yeah, I should be doing that next Wednesday.
Perfect.
On twitch.tv/mythic_mevo.
Perfect. And you stream each morning-ish time, right? Like 10 to 4 or whatever? 10 to 3?
Yeah, 10 to 3 or 4.
Word. All right, cool. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode. You can find Allie there, and you can find me each every week at Card Kingdom alongside Allie writing about stuff, and at twitter.com at Mason E. Clark. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see y'all next week for our first impressions of Kaldheim in Standard and Historic.